Before I start my session, I want to say that I'm super happy to see you all. This is just so impressive how many people, how many young people were willing to spend their Saturday in this event about the topic which I'm also very passionate about. And although I was born in the very same year as this plastic box that was shown, I still remember that when you are young, you might have some other options to spend your weekend. So I really appreciate this chance to spend this session with you. Unfortunately, not in Georgia or in Armenia. I'm here in Estonia. I'm not sure if you can see. This is how it looks like this morning. There is a heavy snowfall and quite a thick layer of snow. So really in the Christmas mood already, but this is not what I'm going to talk about today. I will now try my best to make the screen sharing work. So I will use my time dedicated to me to discuss a little bit about the different ways to make smart decisions. And I will introduce one European method to do this in a meaningful way. So since my main focus today is European method, I am using this lovely town of Brussels as a symbol of the place where the top level decisions are made, but of course it doesn't necessarily have to be Brussels. It can be Tbilisi, it can be Yerevan when it comes to national policies, and of course it can be, for example, New York when it comes to UN Sustainable Development Goals. But yes, this is the place where we expect that high-level decisions are made and then implemented on the, so to say, lower levels of places and territories. And one example is this, I hope, lovely village in Georgia. But this, I think, is here to illustrate that sometimes it can be really relative when we speak about geographical terms, for example. So we can see that actually the elevation of Brussels, and this is actually the case for New York as well, is significantly lower. So we can think that maybe the perspective is even better from this lovely village of Georgia, which I'm not sure whether I'm able to pronounce, but this was just selected randomly to share the first letter. But as far as I explored the background of the village, it was quite interesting because the question mark behind the population is there because I wasn't quite sure whether this data that there is still one person living there is accurate. So if there is somebody from Akhmeta municipality and knows better, please feel free to update me. What is the current situation in this village? Because I read an interesting fact that the government of Georgia or Georgia declared that this is the highest populated place. So it's also very, very interesting. But nevertheless, so this is to illustrate that the decisions that are made in New York, Brussels, Tbilisi, and Yerevan will have an impact on the very rural levels, even in these villages, which might not be even populated all year round. But let's hope that these decisions are wise enough that they will be populated. Okay, a few words about me, why I am here, and why do I think that I am justified to speak about this topic. So I am, as I said, hopefully, that I'm currently here in Estonia, in a municipality very close to our population and our capital. So we are quite a small country. We joined the EU in 2004. And in some countries, when I introduce myself, I have to emphasize that in Estonia, my first name is very common female name. I know that it's not that much of the case in Georgia and Armenia, but in some countries not far from you, like Turkey, it sometimes creates some confusion. So I have to say that it is very common. The reason I'm really happy to be here today and why I was so impressed about the program and by the fact that there are so many interested people interested in this issue is that my academic background, my university background is environmental governance. So I studied biodiversity, ecosystem services. I researched ecological network for many, many years. But my professional background is more related to local governance. After the university, I ended up working in one municipality, and I stayed there for almost 15 years. I had different positions. I ended up as a mayor, as a local politician, but after that, I have worked as a consultant, as an expert, as a project coordinator, and I'm mainly here in Estonia, but I'm really, really thankful if I have opportunities to work with the projects in other countries listed here, and this involves Georgia as well. Not Armenia, not yet, but let's see. I would be delighted to see this wonderful country as well. Okay, so why we need to speak about this topics today? Environmental issues, how to make smart and effective decisions are that we still have quite a lot of problems in the world. So this is according to one source, Ipsos, that what are the main global concerns today. Of course, we know what is the top concern. Of course, a few years ago, the picture would have been different, but still there is quite a huge list, and some of them concern significant amounts of population. So unemployment, there are some issues related with social inclusion, poverty, crimes, healthcare, the environmental issues, issues related with the migration, etc. You can see it here. So this has to be tackled. Otherwise, we are facing huge problems, and it's of course evident that a lot of problems here are closely interlinked. And there is an urbanization. So one might debate and one might discuss whether the urbanization is the cause of those problems that we just saw, or is it a consequence of those problems. But of course, it's still a fact that urbanization is still growing, although we saw some signs that the trends are somewhat shifted by the coronavirus impacts, but it's still there. It's massive. It started in around 50 years ago with some obvious reasons, but now it is still growing. And of course, we can, if we think back to those problems, we can think that partly this is a consequence of those problems, so that people, so to say, escape into the towns to get a better life, to get out of the severe poverty situation, for example. But of course, to a certain extent, this is the cause of our problems, because those growing urban agglomerations, they cause a lot of environmental problems. So it's when it comes to urbanization, we can of course say that it has a lot of negative effects. Growing urban poverty, this is a little bit controversial. So this shows the evolution of the urbanization, because initially during when the industry grew in 1950s, 1960s, when people actually went to the towns, they went there to, as I said, to get the better life. But now the trend is turning. So actually those people who end up in those megacities, they have even a bigger risk to end up in a severe poverty. So a lot of environmental problems, as I said, they are very, the climate change effects can be so much more severe in cities. There are segregation issues, urban employment, high crime rates, and of course, when it comes to the urbanization, it has an impact on the rural areas. So This needs that if we have a problem, we have to find a solution. So, of course, when it comes to the urbanization, we have to also bear in mind, and if you look at literature, you see that there are some positive effects on the urbanization as well, but the set of negative effects are that complex that there are different solutions to address it. But due to our topic today, I will further discuss one of them. But of course, when it comes to smart cities, different climate change mitigation and adaptation methodologies that are especially meant for urban areas. So it's so much more complex, but when it comes to solutions, let's discuss one of them. So if the problem is urbanization, what could be the main solution to address this effect on rural areas? Is of course there is even a term, ruralisation. So it's not very widely used, but this describes well what has to be done in order to balance this situation, to balance this negative effect on the rural areas. I'm sorry, I will go back. Of course, it was seen by the authorities in those centers where the central policies are implemented and worked out. And as we use mainly the example of Brussels today, already 15 years earlier than me and the plastic box was born, European authorities understood that there is a need for additional policy instruments to tackle these issues in rural areas. So this is when the Common Agricultural Policy was born, because of course as you saw from the previous slide, one of the negative issues from the urbanization is the fact that if there is a decline in rural areas, it affects the agriculture and our food safety. So and of course the social problems occur as well. So in 1962, the European policymakers invented the Common Agricultural Policy to make sure that European farmers are more competitive, that they can provide food and other agricultural products to European citizens, and of course to export as well. Already then, they saw a need to agri-environmental schemes, which are also an important part of Common Agricultural Policy. And the last one, which is the most relevant for our today's topic, is to keep the rural economy alive, so that there are enough jobs in farming industries and in other sectors. So that's where when it was kicked off, and since then, of course, the main implementation methodology for this Common Agricultural Policy, called CAP in short, is to provide different financial support for the farmers, so that this is clearly seen by the decision makers that the farmers, due to the urbanization trend, but of course due to some other global trends, are not competitive enough, and it's justified to support them with public money collected from the European Union taxpayers. So there is direct income support, some market measures, but what is important for us today, that there are rural development measures as well. And a certain time, some 30 years ago, European Commission realized that there is more needed to be done in order to contribute into those rural livelihoods, that they saw that those current measures under this Common Agricultural Policies are not enough, and they thought that in addition to those top-down policies to problems I just very briefly mentioned, there is a need to do something more, because they saw that they really don't do enough to keep those rural communities alive. So then they started to introduce and to test at first this methodology called LEADER. So this LEADER actually comes from French language, and then it is an acronym. So, but my French is even worse in terms of pronunciation than Georgian and probably Armenian. So in this case, I just say it in English: links between activities for the development of rural economy. But I'm quite sure that when you see those people that are active in this LEADER methodology and implementing it, I'm not sure. I haven't seen anybody who actually knows the acronym by heart, but maybe the people in France, they know best. So I will now briefly introduce what is this LEADER, but the main core component of this LEADER implementation is the local action groups. So it means that in order to implement this segment of the European Common Agricultural Policy, there has to be a local action group. So this is the main tool to get those local representatives on board, and how to make this bottom-up decision-making actually work. What might be confusing during the last almost 8 years, it is the fact that this LEADER is often used together with another acronym, which is CLLD. So CLLD means Community-Led Local Development. It was, so to say, added to LEADER methodology around 2014, because then European Union realized that those lags, they function really well to be the representatives of local population, to function as bottom-up decision-making tools. So then they widened the perspective. So this is a community-led local development, which should support comprehensive integration of local needs and solutions. And in practice, it meant that from 2014, European Commission started to encourage member states to use those lags to implement and distribute the funds from different funding sources. So in European Union, we have different funds. Until this time, lags and this LEADER was mostly interlinked with agricultural fund. So it was there was this obligation that at least 5% of all the euros that were given from Brussels to the member states for those agriculture and the rural issues, at least 5% has to be given to the lags from this particular fund. But since 2014, European Commission allowed member states to use, for example, social fund or regional fund and other cohesion funding tools, using those lags as decision-making units on local level. So pretty much, if you see them together, they are not totally the same, but we can say that CLLD is kind of an updated version of LEADER. So if some of you have attended already a seminar or a training, or I hope there are participants from the municipalities where lags are already functional. You have seen those 7 principles a lot. And if we compare the acronym on these 7 principles, I think those 7 principles are better known. And then I think all the people who are really active in LEADER CLLD, they know actually this by heart. So, but let's go through them together quickly to freshen up your memory for the ones who have already heard about it, and to introduce the methodology for the ones who are not yet familiar. So the main issue is this bottom-up approach. So as I said, around 30 years ago, it was acknowledged that the common agricultural policy, which was by essence top-down. So the principles, what type of support to give to the farmers, were taken in Brussels. So it was realized that we need something to supplement this. So this bottom-up approach means that the decisions that should be done in a very, very local level by the rural communities themselves. This is the main issue. So whenever we are speaking about lags and how to set them up, so this is the main issue that we shouldn't forget, that there shouldn't be very strict rules from capitals, national capitals, from Brussels to restrict the activities of those local action groups. So area-based approach. This means that those lags should operate on the territorial framework, which actually is well justified. So the territories of the lags by European Union are defined by the fact that they have to be rural. So cities, big cities, urban areas are usually excluded from this program, although there are already some activities to address the rural and urban linkages. But there has to be an area where those communities think together what to do. And this area doesn't have to be an administrative area. It doesn't mean that it has to be a formal municipality, with administrative borders or region. There has to be some common features or some common challenges that those communities face. So within the EU, we see a great diversity in terms of those local action groups, in terms of territories. So in some cases, several municipalities are together. There are smaller lags, they are bigger lags. So in this case, this is very diverse, but this actually illustrates well this bottom-up approach. So those communities that are involved in this leader CLLD implementation, they can actually decide themselves what unites them, what are the common issues, and then based on those criteria, they form a lag and they start to address the issues of those particular territories. The third principle is the local partnership. Local partnership means that into this local action group there has to be involved three sectors of local stakeholders, so that it means civil sectors or citizens. It depends whether the citizens are organized into a civil sector or not, but just citizens, private sector, local entrepreneurs. They are a very important sector to be involved, and of course public sector. Although we cannot say that this is the same as municipalities, so it's wider. So there has to be, as says this fourth principle, it is multi-sectoral, and this is the main thing that makes a difference between municipality and local action groups. But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be interlinked. So municipalities and local democracies strongly embedded into the leader principles. But of course, it is usually regulated that they shouldn't overpower, so that the civil society, citizens, and the private sector also should have a voice when it comes to the decision maker. So all together, of course, when you bring all those stakeholders together, one of the important principles is that they are networking there. So out of this networking, there comes an added value. They bring their knowledge, and during this networking, it is expected that they make better decisions. Sixth is innovation. This comes from the fact that since we saw, or the decision-making authorities saw, that what is happening now on the rural areas doesn't work, we still have those problems. So it means that those lags should support and enhance new solutions. It doesn't mean that they have to be a rocket science or some very fancy IT solutions, but of course they can if it's possible and relevant for the rural communities, but not necessarily. It has this innovation means that it should support initiatives that are new and haven't done in those rural communities before. And the seventh one is the cooperation. So it means that all those involved organizations and citizens in lag, of course, they can cooperate, but it goes a few levels up since this is very important that all those lags in particular countries will cooperate to each other to share their best practices, to share their experiences. So they're in European Union countries and already, of course, in Georgia as well. And I'm quite sure soon in Armenia, there are close cooperation projects between the lags operating in the particular country. So then on the next level, there is a huge networking cooperation going on between the lags in EU and of course those lags also cooperate with those lags that are now operational outside EU, and this is strongly encouraged, and those funds that are allocated for those lags to support rural development, usually a percentage of those funds are already like earmarked for the cooperation project. So this is what is very strongly articulated in the Leader CLLD principles. So as I said, Leader already survived 30 years. Just this week, there was a huge celebration in Sweden. There was a conference where Georgia was also represented. I'm not sure whether Armenia, but I'm sure that next time, since as far as I know, the Leader pilot supported also by EU, like in Georgia, is somewhat younger than in Georgia. So that's why I don't know that much about it, but I'm quite sure that we will hear more about this progress in Armenia as well. So when it comes to Estonia, when it comes to my own experience, since we joined EU later, we were not there when it began in EU. So we started to enjoy to implement this later, and which excites me, of course, very much is the fact that around 7 or 8 years ago, European Union realized that it works relatively well in EU. So this is why when it comes to the EU support and EU programs in neighboring countries, they have now, I mean, the people in Brussels in European Commission have started different programs like NPART, for example, to pilot and test and hopefully to make it sustainable in different countries, in EU neighborhood, in some other countries as well. So those countries now include Georgia and Armenia. So in Georgia, as you probably know, there are now, as far as I know, some 12 to 14 lags. So I hope that at least some of the participants from the municipalities that are covered with those pilots are already aware of what is going on, how those lags operate, and when it comes to the wider spread of the methodology in the countries, you will be having a possibility to experience this bottom-up decision-making process firsthand. So when it comes to the Leader CLLD, I hope that I convinced you that this is something super nice, needed, very positive. Everybody should be super excited about it. But I have a confession to make that in 2007, when I worked as a mayor, and I was approached by those people who thought that it is a good idea to establish those lags and to start giving more decisive power to local citizens, to entrepreneurs, I was fairly skeptical, because when it comes to the bottom-up decision making, it might happen that it was my case, that those people who think that they are there to make decisions. So you have to face the problem that sometimes those people who, for example, mayors like me, might be a little bit skeptical, and that might take time until they really think it's a good idea, and it takes some practice to really showcase the results. So it took me some 5 years to be involved in this process, when I actually turned into a believer, or some sort of light version of the missionary of the leader CLLD, and that's why I sometimes end up in different countries to introduce what is the methodology and to support the implementation. I would like to share some practical stories, what can actually happen on the ground or as a result of the implementation of those 7 leader CLLD principles. There are 3 of them. So let's start with the most recent story on the left-hand picture. Now you can see some vehicles, ATVs. So they are meant for Borjomi municipality, because using those 7 principles, the Borjomi lag decided that these vehicles are needed for Borjomi in order to tackle with a local problem related to the forest fires. So then the local action group got a grant, and as a result, those vehicles were purchased and handed over to the rescue service to be used, particularly in Borjomi, to address the forest fires as soon as possible. So in the middle picture, you can see an entrepreneur from Moldova, from the small village called Palanca. He has a small winery and a guest house. The small village of Palanca is situated quite far in Moldovan terms, because Moldova is also a small country, quite far from the capital Chisinau, quite close to the Ukrainian border. So this meant that if he had guests in the guest house, for all the laundry, he had to took all the towels and sheets and to drive to Chisinau to wash them there and to bring them back. Very trivial problem, but he got a grant from this leader CLLD program to buy himself a set of washing machines and tumble dryers. So this meant that his guest house and some other small guest houses in the village didn't have to take those laundry into the capital anymore. And the third story is from Estonia. There is a small settlement not far from the capital, but it was really in a very sad state, because it was a former there was a former prison that was abandoned. You can see a few buildings, and there was a former quarry where they took the limestones out. So it created quite an interesting, but to a certain extent, depressive landscape. But then it was one entrepreneur was attracted by it, and then they started a recreational center in this location, and he got a grant to buy some of those stand-up paddle boards. So these are the examples of the grants. So they are really grassroots grants. They are not huge. I think they, from the monetary terms, they might be from 5,000 to 25,000 euros. So in this case, but they are really a small scale, but they contribute into into global and EU level challenges. So of course, when you do not have to travel so much with your laundry, there is less transport, you contribute into the climate change issue. Biodiversity loss, if the forest fires can be addressed quickly and they don't destroy so much forests in this valuable Borjomi National Park, you can address the biodiversity loss issue. If your small local rural guest house and winery functions better, you can make your business more profitable, you can create more jobs. If nice things happen in rural settlements that didn't look that nice before, of course it makes the rural life more attractive and sustainable. Where disasters can be prevented if in the case of this Borjomi forest fires, and then of course if those people are active and exercise even on those artificial lakes, it can prevent health issues. And of course, this is not a complete list. So if we are really creative and then brainstorm between ourselves, we can think about the other global challenges that could be interlinked with those three small stories from Georgia, Moldova, and Estonia. So if we collect all those tens of thousands small projects selected and decided by the local pollutions, we can see that they actually are well interlinked with global challenges. But we can be quite sure that without this local knowledge, people in Brussels, in Tbilisi, and New York would have not known that these were the particular local needs that needed to be addressed. So it's quite impossible to know that this guest house actually needed those washing machines, and we also didn't know that particular. We knew about the problem in Borjomi, but we didn't know that what type of intervention was needed in order to make these local projects work. So now, if we return to our title of the presentation, so top-down versus bottom-up, we can cross actually this word versus, because although I'm here to, so to say, to preach the bottom-up decision making, and I'm really supported, and that's why I do my work to create those enabling conditions so that local communities and of course local youth as well is empowered, that we should know better what is actually needed. But the fact is that we cannot make it work without top-down decisions as well. So we can do those nice projects with based on the local knowledge, because there are those policy frameworks created in Brussels, for example, for those empowered and leader CLLD. But of course, it doesn't mean that Brussels is the center of the universe. Of course, there are other national and international programs, but I hope that this example enables you to understand that we need both, and they need to function very well together in order that we have so much more of those stories from the ground that might seem teeny tiny and very grassroots, but if we put them all together, they actually make a change. So I thank you all. So I'm not quite sure whether the Google Translate did its job to provide the Armenian and Georgian versions of thank you, and the last one is thank you in Estonian language. Aitäh.